Hi there, Virgo. Welcome to your end of May 2020 General Tarot Update. It's Rena here. So I'm just shuffling the cards. We have two major arcana cards. It's funny, there's kind of like that spiritual connection or thing, connected to both of them, because even the Temperance card, they show an angel. Temperance card connected to Sagittarius specifically. Let me just take this in for a second here. Okay. So the heart of the matter is the Queen of Swords. I often think that this woman is trying to steel herself to make a decision of some sort. And that decision cannot be something that she has an emotional pull towards. In other words, she may be very invested in a particular situation that is not necessarily something she should be invested in. It's not necessarily something that is good for her to continue to, I don't want to say indulge in, but you know what I mean, to be involved with. And this, it's interesting because the thing that comes to mind, obviously, is a personal relationship, but that's not necessarily the case. It could even be in the workplace. And perhaps there is this feeling of like, I really like my coworkers or I really like my boss, but in the past position, we have the Three of Pentacles. This can be those coworkers, and maybe you have a good camaraderie, rapport with them, and you will miss that. There can be even a situation where you assumed a position of authority over coworkers, and that created problems. Another possibility is that there was an affair with a coworker, or even any kind of personal relationship that involves three parties. Whenever you see the number 3, it sometimes is indicative of a lover's triangle. And therefore, the person feels a sense of like pull, of like, wow, I want to be with this person, but I also want to be with that person. And that kind of push-pull situation. And the higher message in all of this is the 8 of Cups, which is leaving what no longer is fulfilling for you, seeking that sense of fulfillment in your life. And this is obviously something that comes up, I would say, in 2 specific time frames. Midlife, the typical midlife crisis, which we can, if we were going to make it in terms of chronology, it would probably be nowadays in one's 40s, because, we have longer lifespans and we don't think of people in their 30s as middle-aged usually. And the other time, no, I will say that there can be during your second Saturn return, or right before that, so in your mid-50s perhaps, when you're not too young to necessarily think about retiring from service to others altogether, or even if you just want to look at it in terms of the work itself, but you're at a stage where you may have participated in a profession for many years, so you kind of know the drill, you've been there, done that, and you're not necessarily that fulfilled anymore. You've kind of done everything you can do. So that could be one kind of crossroads. Midlife when you're kind of like waking up from the dream of childhood and all of the, maybe, you know, experiencing a lot of the effects of that to some degree or another, and maybe having children of your own, and that's bringing up past issues. But other than those two periods, then we can also say the period of graduating college, or pre-first Saturn return, because, or even during the first Saturn return, because there may have been preparation in a particular area, and then once you have actually experienced that career, been on your first job, you're like, oh man, dang, I don't like this line of work. I mean, it was so different when I was studying it, but now that I'm actually doing it, I'm not happy with this. So anyway, kind of like trying to figure out how to navigate, especially if you're making good money with the Three of Pentacles. What crosses you is the Judgment card, and this can be not exercising good judgment, and that coming back to bite you in the butt. Virgo is typically a very analytical sign. I have the moon in Virgo, and I know, and having the moon in Virgo makes a person much more, I think, even more insecure in a lot of ways, and lots like self-critical. And one of the things that I think happens sometimes is that quest for perfection can lead to an inability to assess things in an appropriate way, because there's a tendency to overblow things and say, if it's not perfect, it's not worth it at all, and those kinds of deals. So how can I say this? If you are trying to make a decision, do not make it based upon some kind of overly idealistic notion in your head. And sometimes when I'm doing personal readings, I can see that people have distortion in their thinking with hard angles to Neptune from even the moon, even though the moon isn't really your thoughts and more of your feelings, from the moon to Neptune. Even conjunctions can be kind of challenging, but definitely squares and oppositions, and Mercury to Neptune, because Mercury can be your perception, the way that you think. And there can be over idealization. Also with Jupiter, kinds of Mercury to Jupiter, for instance, exaggerating. If you have Sagittarius, as maybe your Virgo is your rising sign, or you have a Sagittarius moon, and you tend to blow up things way beyond. And so it can be, whether it's good or bad, that you exaggerate what is going on, and that leads you to thinking that something is missing. Now, I will say that you have to honor that Eight of Cups, because you don't want to, if you really feel unfulfilled in your life, it's going to affect even being able to get up in the morning and do it. You don't want to mail in your life. Sometimes, if you have a lot of earth in your chart, Virgo, you may think that being practical and doing what is right in the material sense is the end-all be-all. And I'm here to tell you that that is not true, that you have, you know, there's that saying, man cannot live by bread alone. I remember it was funny, I think that was Archie, I think I first saw that in an Archie comic book. You can tell how old I am, that we used to have those in the 70s. Archie and Jughead. I don't even know if they have that. If you're under the age of 30, you might not even know what I'm talking about. And I remember seeing that. Man cannot live by bread alone. He needs bologna and all this stuff, you know. Mayonnaise. Oh boy, I don't know how I got off on that tangent. The Judgment card in the challenge position can also be like something, if you're waiting for a divorce that hasn't come in. Of course, you know, we've had a lot of holdups. We also have retrogrades right now that may also be affecting things But you may feel like your life cannot really begin. But I would say with the Eight of Cups that there's probably something still that you need to go towards. I always say that it's not enough to leave something. You have to have somewhere that you are trying to go towards. That it's not just about, some people are really good at leaving, but they're not really good at having a vision for their life of where they're going, of what direction they're going in. It's like knowing what you don't want, but not knowing what you want, and that kind of thing. And also not understanding cause and effect. The Judgment card can be about rebirth. So again, that sense of maybe you're not at that point yet where you really feel like your life is yours. But it doesn't mean that there aren't things that you still have to do. And also understanding cause and effect. If you put something out, that the things that you get in your life are coming back for a reason. And it's an energy exchange. And so it's up to you to not feel like a victim of whatever your situation is, but to feel that you have control over your actions. You don't have control over other people's actions, obviously, or just the divine consciousness as a whole, what God intends or what the universe intends, but you do have some control. What's coming in, a very spiritual card, the High Priestess, be still and know, that sense of looking inside, not looking to the mind to solve all your problems. That's another thing, too. With the Queen of Swords, I see a battle between the intellect and the emotions. The Queen represents the water element. The higher message of the Eight of Cups is leaning towards the water or the spiritual, the intuitive, as is the High Priestess. The Swords represents the air element, but we can extend that to Virgo because you're ruled by Mercury, which is the mind and communication, and the ruler of the third house and the sixth house. You're the sixth house. Gemini is the third house, and that kind of the mind, especially with Gemini being connected to mundane knowledge. And you are the type who really kind of believes in learning for practical application, as opposed to learning for the love of it, or just for the challenge, for the mental challenge. It's this idea of, what can I do with this knowledge? If I am learning something and it doesn't have any practical application, is it really something that I want to pursue? And you don't want the intellect to get too great a foothold. You want to nourish and nurture that intuitive side of yourself, which you may be pushing back for some reason because you feel like it's not, provable or something like that. The outcome is Temperance. Again, balance. Material, land, water, the spiritual. Connected to Scorpio. We're having it's connected to Sagittarius. We're having a lunar eclipse in Sag on the 5th of June. So this is right after this time period. And for you, Virgo, this will be the 4th house of home and family. And even for some Virgos in the latter degrees, last half of the sign, this will be in your 3rd house, which could be some kind of training that is finally completed, or the realization that you need more training. So this does connect with the intellect in that sense. But even like a spiritual download that can be very powerful in guiding you forward. So I think that this is a time of reflection and tuning in to your higher self, and kind of making sure that you're not too attached to what your mind thinks, but that you have, kind of like a sense of respect for the spiritual part of yourself. And yeah, that's what I have for you. And I hope that you enjoyed this, Virgo. If you would like a private reading, most of my readings are astrology based. I use your natal chart for all kinds of issues, including just the natal chart interpretation itself. Being a moon in Virgo, I tend to hone in on details. And so that the link to my online store is below. I hope you have a great rest of May. Take care. Bye.